Cool. So I'll click go live now.
How exciting.
So hello internet at large and all students who are here to listen to us. That sounds so robotic.
That did.
10 minutes, and during the 10 minutes we always like to do a little just talking to the chat to see how everyone is, see what everyone wants to get out of it. And it's just a good way to get into the live stream, to be honest. So Naomi, how are you?
Oh, yes, I'm very well, thank you. We've got a 10-minute timer on. Are we meant to have that on? Yes.
Yeah.
You see, I'm so on board with all the technicalities of all this. I don't even know what time it is, quite frankly. But I can understand that we are just about 10 minutes away from going live, and that is why there's a 10-minute timer on the screen.
Yeah. I think I confused you with the fact that I gave an introduction. Usually I just go live and go, by the way, Naomi, we're live.
Yes, but no, I do like to know that we've gone live. I do feel comfortable. Well, it's not that I feel... I like to know when we've gone live so I can feel comfortable knowing that we're not live, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand that. It's a relief to know when you are broadcasting yourself to the internet and when you are not.
Well, it's a sensible thing to know, isn't it? Not that I ever say anything that I wouldn't be happy to be broadcast to the entire internet, but sometimes I say things
good to know
that I wouldn't be happy to be broadcast to the entire internet.
It's just good to know when you are. Something which I am happy to be broadcast to the internet at the moment is, and something I'd like to tell you about, Naomi, is the progress on the, not the Assignment Journey podcast, the Success as a Student podcast series. I finished my third interview for it yesterday, and I've decided that I'm going to start sending a example of the interview to the staff so that they can, if they want to, choose to see what type of interview it's a bit like. So I sent an example of the growth mindset interview that I did with Dr. Fiona Shelton last week to the person I'm interviewing for it this week, who is the former Vice President of Education of the Union Students, Scarlett Moss. And yeah, she watched it back, and it's the first chance I've actually realised that no one's had a chance to listen to it yet and give feedback.
No, I've not heard any of it yet.
No. It's because I want you to see it with all the graphics once they're done, which hopefully we should have a pilot by the end of the week. Maybe next week if not. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out. But yeah, the feedback was really good, and it's just nice to see people who aren't me and Steve, who are the people who've been making it so far, see what it's like and give feedback. And having done the interviews, I think they've all gone really well.
Good. Well, I'm sure they have. This doesn't surprise me at all, but I am pleased. I am pleased it's going well. So yes, anybody that is listening, it's great excitement for this podcast series. Are you going to talk about it a bit more in the
Yeah, I'll talk about it at the start when we're just getting to beginning the live stream. But yeah, I'll.
You know what? Sorry, I just had another thought. Carry on with your what you're saying, Alex.
But yeah, it's quite exciting. So it's basically like a podcast about all the skills of being successful as a student, and I'm interviewing both staff who are successful and who've done really well, and also have experience talking about a skill. And I'm also interviewing successful students about how that skill has helped them and how they, as a student, developed that skill recently. Because the focus, if I interviewed the staff, they know a lot about the skill, but their examples of how they developed it, they are often quite useful, but sometimes they might be a bit dated because at the fact that they might have been developing that skill as a student quite a while ago, but they've still got that vital knowledge. So I've got the current student experience of how you can develop it and also the staff knowledge, and together they make a really good combination.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea, Alex, that you're doing.
Yes.
It's a good thing. I was just remembering. I'm looking. Should we talk about the Word document now before we start properly? I was looking at the Word document and I was thinking about the whole job titles thing, because I was saying to Alex just now, I went on a training course yesterday, and where one of the things we talked about was it was about motivations actually, and that we did talk about how some people like to say their job titles and other people are not interested in job titles, and I definitely came in the category of people that are not interested in job titles, and that's why I kept on putting don't put job titles into our Word document. But I wonder, like I say, it was really interesting, these different motivations that we were talking about yesterday.
I think there's a number of considerations to think about it. So in the podcast series, I have got the job titles in, but the reason why I've got that is because I think it's essential for the people who are being interviewed not for the people. I think it's essential for the audience to know and know that they
Yes.
can trust who is being interviewed. Whereas with the skills live stream, it's known that we're from the skills team because it's a skills live stream. We'll say it's from the skills team.
And it's informal and it's regular and people
Yeah.
know us. So when I talk to people that I meet every day, I don't tell them my job title every day, but I might do in the work context. But I might do the first time I meet them. So it's it's akin to that, isn't it? We're not going to live stream every day. I don't think we can cope with that. The internet can't cope with that.
My internet definitely couldn't cope with that. Yeah, it's definitely a consideration. I think part of it comes down to how confident you feel that you deserve your job title in terms of if you have any imposter syndrome or anything like that. Or, because I know that when I first became a chairperson, I did not feel like I deserved that because I just inherited the title essentially. I just created an organisation and therefore you gain that title because, well, you're the one in charge of it. And so I didn't feel that comfortable saying I'm the chairperson. Especially because at the time I'd only done the same amount of work as the secretary, who was my partner, Alana. And so I often felt like I didn't deserve that title. But the more work you do for things, the more you can feel comfortable with it. But I know essentially when you start with a title, you might not want to include it. So welcome to everyone who's just joined. I've just seen that 2 people have just joined the live stream. So welcome to those 2 people. 3 people. Welcome everyone. If there's anything you'd like to get out of today's live stream, do let us know in the chat. 4 people, welcome.
Yes, Alex and I are just rambling at the moment, but we'll start talking properly. You can see the little countdown.
Yeah.
That will tell you at what point we'll start talking properly. I can sort of see the countdown. I can see it, I assume, 10 seconds behind.
It's about 30 seconds because of the snow. I thought
30
I'll
seconds
put it on
behind.
normal latency.
Okay.
Just to help my internet, last week we had a catastrophe with my internet for the first few minutes. So this week I'm going to give my computer a little break, you know. So there's a bit of a delay. So there's about a 30-second delay on what I say and what Naomi says and what you hear. But that's all good.
Is it snowing with you now, Alex?
Is it snowing where I am now? I'm blind. I opened my curtain for a second because my lighting's terrible with my room, so I have my curtain shut when I live stream. I don't think it is, but it might snow. I set this up a while back and I can't really change it now, so it is the way it is.
No, I wasn't being critical. That was me being British and talking about the weather. We've not had any snow today. We had some yesterday, but none today. Although actually there was quite a lot of snow on my car overnight. So I think it snowed overnight, but it's gone now. The sun's come out.
Often these live streams and our online sessions have students from across the world attending. So if you are in a different country or you've got any weather where you are that might be a bit lower different, let us know because it's always interesting to see where you're from.
Yes, we can have it out. Let's talk about the weather. That is amazing.
We've got a minute.
What's the weather like in the chat? Tell us what the weather's like where you are.
Just to let you know with the chat, feel free to say anything at any point. The chat isn't actually recorded, so when the live stream goes up onto YouTube as a video, no one else can see the chat because I will just have the video version up. I may reference your names if you are in there, but I won't call you out if you said anything that's you aren't comfortable with going out into the live stream. So we've got about a minute left before we start today.
I'd forgotten about the 30-second thing. I was sat staring at, because I've got the chat on my phone, staring at the chat going, why is no one telling me about the weather? But I've got to wait for 30 seconds. And then I'm sure there's going to be a whole swathe of messages.
Well, here's the thing, though. You've got to wait
telling
for 30
me about
seconds,
the weather.
and that's when they hear it. They've then got to think,
That's true.
twice, and send. So actually,
That's true.
It's 30 seconds till they first know about the question. So, yeah, there is a delay. So often when I will ask a question to the audience, I will just keep talking for 30 seconds afterwards because there's no way you would have even known. And then I'll wait. So we've got 30 seconds left before we start today's live stream. Looking forward to it today. And yeah, it's probably one of the most chill live streams we've had in a while. Just about a little discussion about lectures and tutorials.
Got the countdown theme song in my head now.
10 seconds till we begin. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and hello there everyone. Welcome to the University of Derby Library livestream, led to you today by your skills team. So hello Naomi.
Hello Alex, hello everybody.
So Naomi,
my daughter might be coming to say hello as well, just so
special
everybody is
guest
aware.
today. But that is something to take into consideration when you are preparing for a lecture or tutorial. Hello there. welcome to the stream. Oh, thank you to everyone who's chatting as well. So Naomi's currently put herself on mute, but that's all good. So whilst Naomi's on mute, I'm going to just outline what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So today we're talking all about lectures and tutorials and how you can really get the most out of them. Especially in an online environment as well. So we're tailoring it a little bit to the online environment, given that that's what people are taking lectures and tutorials in at the moment. And we're just giving our advice. So things that we'll be talking about today, how you can talk in lectures, how you can prepare, and tutorials as well, so how you can add to discussions, how you can prepare for all of them. And we're also going to be talking about how you can use online recordings of topics. So I've just seen a question.
Jessie just wants to say hello. So Jessie, you say hello.
Hello.
There we go. You've said hello. Do you want to pop off and play now? There we go. Sorry, Alex. Yes, we've got a question. Is it about the weather?
No, we've got a question.
No.
We've got two things. First of all, Afro says, "Hello, gorgeous and adorable, bless." And yeah, it's the chat loving Jessie today.
Excellent.
So, yeah, Tim just answered the question as well that I was going to answer, so I'll let that be the way it is. So
I don't know what the question was though.
It was why we started early. So Tim's answered that. It's a trial to see if it can reach more people. So it's a trial. We'll see how it goes, and we'll reflect and maybe change the ones in the future. We'll do a few like this, and then we'll see how it works.
Yes.
So,
can I ask just to do a point of clarification before we get started properly? We're talking about tutorials. Point of clarification: tutorials and lectures. You can tell at times that both of us studied law, can't you? How are we defining a tutorial and a lecture, and the difference between them? What terminology are we using? Because I often talk about seminars, and I don't know if that is
a seminar tutorial is very similar to a tutorial. So we're talking about tutorials and seminars in one, and lectures.
And those are smaller groups, would we say?
Smaller groups. So a lecture is, for all intents and purposes, a bigger session with a larger audience where it's more delivered to you. And a tutorial is where it's smaller groups and you're more involved and you're often asked to do preparation for them and you're expected to at times contribute to the discussions.
Yeah, because they are quite different things. I would say they're quite different things, and I'd approach them quite differently. So I think we need to be clear at the beginning what we're meaning when we're talking about a lecture. Like Alex just said, I would say a lecture is one person at the front talking predominantly and everybody else listening predominantly, whereas a tutorial or a seminar is more interactive.
So the last thing to add before we get into today's topic of the week, which is all about lectures and tutorials, is that we're currently working on a great new podcast series. I say great because I'm biased and I'm involved in it. And that podcast series is all about being successful as a student. So we're looking at different elements and different skills that make up a successful student and interviewing people who are successful, both staff and students. So if you're interested in being interviewed for the series, I'm going to post a form into the chat. At the end of today, I'm going to be sending an email out to everyone who's filled in that form, asking for more specific what they would like to be involved in. So if you're interested, do fill in that form, and I will see if we have the ability to interview you for that series.
Yes, and it's not a scary kind of interview kind.
No.
You use the word interview, and that sounds a bit scary, doesn't it? But it's a conversation, is it? It's a chat.
Conversation about your experiences and how you reflected on them and what your outcomes are. So, enough about the podcast. Let's get into today and what we're talking about. So, today's topic of the week is all about...
Was that the transition? Just to clarify, as ever, I can't see much of what's going on. Although I can see you today, Alex. Sometimes I can't see you, but today I can see you, so that is helpful. And I just saw the flourish. There was a topic of the week, flourish.
You can see me just
I approve. Yes.
Do it. So yeah, this week, the topic of the week is all about lectures and tutorials and how you can make effective use of them. So the first thing that we're going to be discussing, Naomi back on stream, is preparing for lectures and tutorials. But we're able to talk about anything that you would like. If you've got any questions about anything to do with lectures and tutorials or anything about studying at university, do let us know in the chat and we'll cover them either when they're relevant or at the end of the live stream. So, preparing for lectures and tutorials. So, we've clarified what lectures and tutorials are, but shall we say for lectures first, how would you, Naomi, recommend that students can prepare for the lectures that they have?
So, as with everything that we talk about, a lot of it's going to depend on your particular subject, where you are in your course as well. You might need to do a bit more preparation. It might be that you need to do more preparation in your first year for lectures than you do in your third year. It might be the other way around. But I think there are some key things that are probably fairly universal. I don't want to say absolutely universal, but fairly universal. So firstly, check if there is any pre-reading. Have you been told to do anything to prepare? Really straightforward example relating to my daughter, again, her homeschooling. She has been told these last few days before her morning registration meeting she has to bring certain things with her. So sometimes that's a pen and paper, sometimes today it was something red and something blue. So that's really straightforward instruction. She knows that she needs to bring something red and something blue to her registration, so that's what she can do. So if you have been told to bring pen and paper with you, for example, make sure you do that. If you have been told to read a certain chapter of a book before the lecture, make sure you've done that. So that would be the first thing. If there's anything explicit in terms of pre-reading, then it's a good idea to do it. The other thing I would say... Oh, sorry, Alex.
I was going to say, I think with that pre-reading thing, I think there is a distinguishing factor. By distinguishing factor, I mean there's a difference between when you have being told for this lecture you need to read this, and when you are given a reading list and they say read all these chapters from books, because often you only need to, I'd recommend reading one of them if you can and you can fit it in, but if you have not as much time, I wouldn't recommend always doing all the reading unless it's something that's being made clear to you this is something you need to read. So with me, when I started my law degree, I did all the pre-reading, and I worked out I needed to read 250 pages a week to do my pre-reading for all my lectures, and it nearly killed me in the first couple of weeks. And that's not true, by the way. I think that's an exaggeration, but it was very tough, and I was like, this is really hard. If this is what I need to do this every week. It's going to be a real struggle. You do need to do work for the lectures, but you don't always need to do all that much reading. And actually, what I found out is that the best advice I would have had for that reading is anytime a lecture is like you need to read the specific part of something, I would do that. But if they said generically read all these books, I would read one of them and read the chapters in one of them, or some of that chapter if I had the time. But what would you say, Naomi, if a student had a lecture and they hadn't actually managed to have time to do that pre-reading? Was it still worth them attending?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's a very short answer to the question.
It's the key.
Absolutely, yeah. It's better to go unprepared than not go at all. Certainly.
Definitely. Because especially with nowadays, a lot of lectures are recorded, so even if you didn't understand it, you can then target reading afterwards, and you will gain understanding by going. I know with my current masters that I'm doing, at times if I've not had a chance to do all the pre-reading, which sometimes I don't because I sometimes have busier weeks than others, I think, is it worth me attending? I might not understand, I might not know what's going on, but I definitely, every time I've attended, having felt slightly unprepared compared to usual, I have got so much out of it. So I've always thought it was worthwhile attending because I could then do the reading afterwards at a later date. Because it builds that understanding.
The other thing I would say with regards being focused about the reading that you do, if you've not got too much time, is to try and identify if there are going to be any terms that you've not come across before, any words that you don't necessarily understand, and define those before you go in. And this was actually because I've been running a workshop on note taking, and I know we're going to talk about note taking in a bit, but and one of the books I read a lot for that was about taking minutes in meetings, and this was something that this book recommended, was to find out. So that said, look at the agenda first, look at the agenda for the meeting, and make sure that you have at least a basic understanding of what is going to be talked about, because then you can write effective notes on it. And the same goes for a lecture. So it might be that, like this is why I was saying it might differ between your first and your third year. In your first year, you might find there's a lot more unfamiliar terms that you need to start defining. And doing some of that pre-reading will help you. It'll be able to help you pull up different terms that you might not understand. I studied criminology when I was undergraduate. I did dual honours criminology and law, and in criminology in particular there's lots of theories being talked about. So if I know that this lecture is on this particular theory or this particular theorist, just a quick background search about that theory or that theorist can be really helpful. If you've not got time to and we're in the realms again of giving advice that isn't the ideal. The ideal is that you do your pre-reading, but Just
realistic.
say that you haven't done your pre-reading. Internet search engines are your friend.
Yeah.
So I would not recommend this for writing an essay, but for preparing for a lecture, if you know that it's on a particular theory or theorist, to give an example, or particular topic, just pop that into your favorite internet search engine and see what comes up. See if there's a Wikipedia article that will give you a basic summary of that theory. And that might make a huge difference in terms of your understanding of the lecture. If you've got a basic understanding of what is being talked about going in, then that will allow you to get a lot more out of it when you're listening to that detail.
I agree. Just having that knowledge of what's coming and being a bit prepared, even if you don't have time to do all the reading, if you just look it up on Wikipedia or look up a summary, that could help you. I actually used to read revision guides before my lectures when I had the chance. I never read revision guides for my classes, but it gave you like a base level summary of what you would learn, and then you could expand upon it. That's something I used to do when I had the time. The busier I got, the less time I had to do that reading.
That tends to happen. The busier one gets, the less time one has.
But just thinking about what you were saying about first year and third year. In your first year, sometimes if you don't understand a term, your lecturer will define that term in class as well. Whereas in your third year, the lecturer might assume you know that term from your first year. So definitely, if you're talking about a subject that you are expected to have knowledge about prior, do have a look back at that, about the lecture slides or the notes you took about those. And that's something that I would always actually recommend doing, because often lectures build one to another. I've realised I'm mirrored in my image, so they build one to another, and they go on. They continue to build and cover the same ground, but with further depth every time. So if you are given a definition of a term in one lecture, you might be expected to know that term in the next one. So my advice for that is, I literally used to spend 10 minutes before my lectures reading through the last week's slides. And if I hadn't got the last week's slides, I might read the ones before as well. But just looking at what's come before and revising those, one, it helps you with revision. Two, it helps you to get the subject. And I just felt like I was able to answer questions, because often they ask you about things that came in the past. And everyone was like, I don't remember that. And I was just like, whoa, I've got like a magic secret here. I've just spent 10 minutes checking back at the slides, and now I remember, because it was a week ago the last lecture was. So definitely before the lecture starts, have a look at what's come before it. It's such a hack.
I would say as well, if you're finding that, say your subject that you're studying is one that's got its own language, I think that it differs from subject to subject to what degree they use their own language. But if you do find that you're having to look up definitions quite a bit, then keep your own glossary. So when you have looked up a word and defined it in preparation for a lecture or in your reading or whatever, and I would think this would probably work best electronically, on an electronic document, so a Word document or something, make a note of that word and the definition, and then when you are going back and you can see a word, maybe it's ringing vague bells, you think I must have read this before summer because it's ringing vague bells, you can go back and look at your own glossary and how you've defined that word previously, and that might really help.
I agree with that as well. I didn't actually do that myself because I had a law dictionary, but there were some terms that were in there that weren't relevant, or that it's probably a good idea. I probably should start doing that, because there's loads of words that are really complicated in my masters at the moment. I like that idea. Just thinking about the preparation for tutorial for lectures then. So just to summarise the points that I think we've made. So what have we said so far? So we've said, if you can, do the reading. If you've been told to read something explicit, make sure you prepare that. So if you've been told to do something or to do some reading, for example, make sure you do it. If you can't do it, try and do something that would be in lieu of it. So try and do something shorter if you don't have the time, like doing a condensed version of the reading, but try and prepare something. If you can't prepare anything, still turn up, because it'll still be worth your time. Don't ever feel that a lecture, that if you haven't prepared for the lecture, that you shouldn't go to that. Do try and attend it, regardless. So that's for lectures. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about preparation for lectures before we move on to tutorials?
We could talk little practical things. If it's a long lecture, take something to drink
Good
with
ideas.
you. Maybe a little snack. Always good to have just a little something. And again, if it's your first lecture in a module, you might not know what's acceptable, what's allowed. But once you know whether that's okay, how much food it's acceptable to bring in. I'm always eating at my desk. I frequently eat during meetings, but I pick and choose my meetings that I eat in. So there are some meetings that I know that it's going to be okay, and some meetings when I absolutely wouldn't. So you'll get that sense in terms of lectures as to what you can do. I'd always err on the side of caution, but but a drink certainly is a good idea. So yeah, those practical things. Make sure, just even things like make sure you're wearing something comfortable. If you are going to a physical lecture theatre, for example, then make sure you're wearing something comfortable, and you're going to be happy sitting in for a couple of hours. If you're going to an online lecture and you're going to be sat in front of your computer, make sure, we talk a lot about preparing your workspace. That applies just as much to sitting in front of a lecture as it does to when you're actively working. Not that you're not actively working in a lecture, you know what I mean. So make sure that you've got a comfortable chair as far as you can, that your workspace is how you like it, whether that's absolutely spotless or with a little bit of clutter. So think about all those practical things as well.
I 100% agree with that. Even as going as far as go to the toilet before the lecture starts, especially if there's not breaks. My lectures, there's often it's 2 hours or an hour and a half before a break because we have a lot to get through. So, yeah, do try and get yourself ready, get yourself prepared, as Naomi said.
Yeah, and actually just thinking about these practical things as well in terms of studying from home, as we have established already quite early on in this live stream, we're working from home at the moment. I am well aware of the challenges of having small children around who can't occupy themselves for a 3-hour lecture. So having an awareness of that, obviously everybody knows their own situation the best, but think about what you can do, what you can't do in terms of keeping kids entertained if that's important, and being prepared and being flexible to going and sorting out the kids if they need it, I think is also a really key thing.
So we have a question that relates to something we'll talk about later, but I will answer it now actually because it is still relevant to lectures and it helps with the flow. We were told that cheeky G, I often find lecturers speed along with their notes. Is it okay to ask them to slow down? Tim has said it is, but it depends on the lecturer. It certainly pays to ask the session to be recorded, and I would agree with that. Lecturers who go really quickly, especially with a recording on Panopto, I used to listen to lecturers, sometimes some lecturers who I've made good notes for, I'd speed them up. Some other lecturers, I'd slow them down. After all, I said they love your point about preparedness, Naomi, so... And I think it's vital.
I do like to be prepared.
I assume it's also childcare, related to childcare as well, both really important. But yeah, I think with what Tim said, in terms of the answer to the question about is it okay for to ask lecturers to slow down, yeah, often, especially online, well, in person, they gauge the mood of the audience. They can see people taking notes. Online, from teaching online, doing the online sessions that I do, I know I have no idea, especially when no one's got the cameras on, like in our online workshops, I have no idea how quick people are, how slow people are. I see.
I had this in a workshop. So one of my favorite, anyone that's been to any of my workshops recently will know, one of my favorite things to do is to get everyone to have their little pointy hands on the screen. Everybody can have a little pointy hand that everyone can see, and I like people to move them around to answer various questions and things like that. But I was leading a workshop once, and we'd done that, and then there was a legacy hand. Someone had still got this little pointy hand on the screen that they were controlling, and I was about to move on to another slide, and I could see this hand going under the words on the screen. I could actively see someone reading it, and so I stopped and waited for them to finish reading that sentence. I could see them doing it, and that was fascinating and very difficult to replicate generally, unless you get everybody with their little pointy hands the whole time. But I think my answer to the original question about asking a lecturer to slow down, your lecturer wants you to understand what they're saying. They want you to be able to follow on to their points, and they want you to be engaged with the session. So again, it will differ from lecturer to lecturer, and the more you get to know your lecturers, the more you get to know their individual personality and things like that. But fundamentally, your lecturer is there to give you information, and they want you to receive that information. So if they are going too quickly for you to keep up, or if you want clarification, I would certainly, if I was running a workshop, I would want someone to say, can you slow down, can you repeat that point? Because why else am I there? Why else am I giving this workshop? If I'm just talking so fast that nobody can keep up with the points, then what am I doing? What's the point of me being there? The point of me being there is for people to understand the points that I'm making. So I certainly would welcome that kind of feedback during a lecture.
I totally agree with that. And if you are afraid of saying to your lecturer that to slow down, just do it. They, like I said, they want that, and it can be quite bold because you think, well, everyone else can read this properly, because you don't know, you can't see what everyone else is doing. I can guarantee you, if you feel that the lecture's going too quickly, especially in a larger audience, there will be other people thinking that as well. So be bold, give your lecturer that feedback, but do it nicely. Don't say you're going too fast. Say, can you please slow down so that I can make notes? Is that okay? And try and do it respectfully.
Yes, and if you really don't feel confident too, then you've got your program reps. You've got other ways of putting that feedback through. So do use your program reps. Is it the case, Alex, you should have a program rep and should know who they are?
Technically, you can know who they are. You can go, if the rep is registered like in the union website, you can find them. I'll get a link up for that and send that into your into the live stream chat. So yeah, you can find out who they are. I'm a program for my course, and people can find me. And it is the type of feedback that lecturers do like to know about. And it is feedback that they can act on, so definitely do raise it. But try and raise it to them first. Even if you just talk to them privately and send them an email, you could do that. Or you could send it to the group chat in front of everyone else, but that's fine.
Yeah, you've lots of options that aren't necessarily interrupting them whilst they're talking and saying slow down because I can't hear you. There's a whole spectrum of options you've got, so think about what's most appropriate for you and for the lecture and the context you're in, I think I would say.
So Tim has just made a point, by the way. When I answer the question of what is a seminar and a tutorial and a lecture, you can probably tell I've never attended a seminar because that's not what they're called for me. They're called lectures. A lecture and a seminar are very, very similar. A tutorial is different. A seminar is very similar. So Tim thank you for that comment, and thanks for correcting me on that one. So hopefully that's clarified that point. So Naomi, whilst I get this link up, would you like to say how you think students can prepare for tutorials instead, given that they are different to a lecture?
Yes, so I do think tutorials need more preparation for, and if I had a limited amount of time and the choice to either prepare for a lecture or prepare for a tutorial, I would probably prepare for the tutorial because, as we said before, they are more interactive. There is a much higher likelihood that you will be expected to contribute, and you will feel more confident in contributing and possibly more able to contribute if you have done that pre-reading first. So again, this is just me talking from my experience as a student, but it would be far more likely that I would be set pre-reading for a tutorial than it would for a lecture. So it's likely that you will have information about what you need to do to prepare, and I would certainly prioritize that because it's a classic. The more you put in, the more you get out of a tutorial. So the more work you put in to prepare, the more you will get out of it afterwards.
100%. You have to be prepared for tutorials. If you aren't prepared, you often gain a lot less on them because there's not new knowledge given to you. So you have to make sure you've done the preparation and then you can reflect on it. If you haven't done the preparation, try and do as much as you can do. Again, like lectures, but it is still, there's more important. So as Naomi said, if you had to choose the two, I always do tutorials. So the tutorials are the reason why I often attend lectures thinking I'm unprepared. It's because I put all my effort into tutorials. And then if I had to choose tutorials or assessments, I would choose assessments, but depends on priorities and time management, and it depends on the circumstances, as you often say in your time management workshop, Naomi.
There are many factors to take into account.
So yeah, the biggest difference with tutorials, as we said, is more preparation is needed. Is there any particular advice that you can think of other than do more preparation and make sure you prioritize that preparation that we can talk about here?
I'm going to use one of our favorite phrases. I'm going to talk about critical thinking because this is the kind of thing that you will be expected to do in a tutorial. It is unlikely that you will be asked to reel off what you have read. The idea is that you read things and then you use that reading or however that preparation works. You use that preparation to contribute, to form your own ideas, opinions, to draw links between things. You'll be using that information. So again, if you've got the time, if you've done the reading, have a think about it. And it doesn't have to be massively in depth because that is what the tutorial is for. But start having a think, even just basic questions like, do I agree with this? What does my instinct say? Does my instinct say this person is talking sense? or can I see anything that's an issue with that? Can I pick out anything that they could have done differently? Just start doing that critical thinking, and that will help you for your tutorial. It will help you for any assessments, particularly if you make notes on that. But start thinking about your who, what, where, when, why, how. Who's writing this? Let's use reading as an example. You say you've set some work to read. Who's writing this? What are they writing about? How have they done their research? Those kind of critical questions are worth just starting to think about in preparation for the tutorial, because that's the kind of thinking your tutorial will be drawing out of you.
Yeah. So as well as that is also a way to get understanding and to make sure you understood what's come before. So as well as showing that you can be critical of the reading that you've done and showing that you understand the reading that you've done, there's a big emphasis in tutorials that these are a chance to revise what the content is that you've already seen, as well as adding further depth to it. So another thing that I would advise, as well as what Naomi you were saying about adding some critical thinking into it, is to actually look back at what's been said in the lecture, because often the tutorial's linked to a lecture. So look at what's been said in that lecture, and if the lecturer has given any further reading from that, consider doing it. Because if they pointed you towards certain resources for further reading, they will be useful. They might be useful if you've got an exam later on, they might be useful for an assessment, but do focus on those tutorials, especially if that tutorial is similar to your upcoming assessment, because often the questions tutorials will be phrased similarly to an exam question or a potential assignment question that you might have. So it's a good opportunity to try and see and practice writing for those. So, oh, Naomi's talking. So what I'm going to say now is, Naomi, are you ready to keep talking?
Yes, I'm back. My daughter wanted me to help her look for a particular unicorn.
I see.
So I will do that once we have finished.
Okay then.
She's got 2 unicorns, but it was a particular different unicorn that she needed.
So later on, we're going to be talking... Yeah, sorry, I didn't respond to you.
Alex just moved swiftly on from my domestic trials.
Yeah, sorry, I've noticed I do that occasionally. I think I do it now anyways. So something that we are going to be talking about later is that with tutorials specifically is how you can make sure you can use your voice in them. So we're talking about a little bit later in the live stream. But Naomi, do you have any more advice for tutorials, or shall we move on to advice for note-taking in both tutorials and lectures?
I think we should move on to note-taking.
Okay. So I already said a little bit ago in response to the question about how if you're trying to note-take and the lecturer is going too quick, then you could quite simply just ask the lecturer to slow down or give the feedback through a program representative. But is there any other advice that you have for note-taking in lectures?
Yes. Don't try and write down everything, because you are very unlikely to be able to write at the same speed that someone's talking, even if they're going nice and slowly. You're very unlikely to be able to write at the same speed that someone's talking, and you will not necessarily get benefit from writing down every single thing that person says. So again, I have a lovely workshop on note-taking that everybody is very welcome to attend when it's next on our calendar. But one of the key points we make in that is that note-taking should be an active process. It's an active thing that you do. It's not a passive writing down of everything that you hear, or if you're reading something, writing down everything that you've read. Note-taking is an active process. So you need, again, it's this critical thinking. You need to be putting your own thoughts and opinions into your notes, and you need to be thinking about what you're taking notes on. So with regards to lecture specifically, have a think about what you need to take notes on and what you don't. So if that lecture is being recorded, then you will not necessarily need to note down all the details. You might not need to note down stats, statistics that you've been given, or numbers or figures or anything like that, because you can go back and get them. So if it's something that you know you can get, it's going to take you a long time to write down, and you can go back and access it later, then you might not want to focus your energy on making notes on that. So think as you're listening, is this a key point? Is it relevant to my assessment? Is it relevant to what I'm currently thinking about? And really focus your energies on making notes on the bits that are important to you. And then as you go, so again in the workshop, which you can actually get more information if you attend.
People are interested in that.
About different formats, note-taking formats. So you might want to think about taking notes in a format that leaves you space to draw your own thoughts and opinions. So it might be that you take notes on a piece of paper that's got the main bit of the page for your notes, but you've left space, a dedicated column on the side where you can write your thoughts and opinions, your thoughts and feelings. So you're separating out what you're hearing in your lecture, and you're making notes on that. But you've also got space to note down what you think about that. Again, those critical questions. And it might be that comes to you in the lecture. It might be as you're listening to something, you can think, well, actually, that's a really great point. I really fully agree with that. I can see how that links into other things. Note that down next to it. It might be that as you're going back and looking at it later, those thoughts come to you. So leave yourself the space to make those links and connections, to do that critical thinking in your notes, because again, you'll get so much more out of it, and it will help you so much more further down the line when you're coming to your assessments.
Yes, sorry, Naomi, I got distracted there. I was looking for parts of the note-taking workshop. So we've asked if in the future, do we have any planned? The answer is currently no, not for this semester. I think you did one a few weeks ago.
Yes, it's run for this semester. The problem is we've got so many workshops, is that we can only really run them once a semester now.
However,
although we would always respond to student need. If we had students coming to us and saying we really need a workshop on X, Y, Z, then we would do our best. But it will be coming back for next semester, absolutely.
However, parts of that workshop are on YouTube. So what I'll do is I put one part in the YouTube in the description of the not in the description, in the chat already. However, if you do search on the channel and look for note taking, there are quite a few videos already up there. We've had another question come in, which says, "This may sound daft, but I often take notes. But often I take notes, then completely bypass them when it comes to researching topics. Any suggestions on using notes? So not just taking notes, but using them." So that was something I was going to raise later as well. But Naomi, do you have any advice for that before I then say what I've got?
I think it can help to make to be, if you're aware of that, to make an active choice to go back, actively prompt yourself to go back and look at your notes. If you do actively prompt yourself to go back and look at your notes and you're reading them and they are not useful, then you need to be thinking about the note taking that you're doing in the first place, because ideally when you are making notes, that will be useful to you when you go back to them. So if you are going back to your notes and they're not useful, then think about why that is. What is it that they're missing something? Is it they've got too much in there? What is it about those notes that's making them not useful to you? And then you can amend your note-taking practice in the future. What were your thoughts, Alex?
Well, I think it comes down to the purpose of taking notes. So parts of the purpose of taking notes is potentially to use them in assignments, but I know some of my assignments don't focus on everything that's in a lecture. So I had some lectures that actually were just about learning things that actually weren't necessarily relevant to the assignment. That sometimes happens. But then it's still worth taking notes of what are the key points that have been said, because they might help you in later years. So
yeah. And also there's great benefit to writing things down. And I think on paper. I find it difficult to think in my head. I think on paper. So if I'm making a note on something, that's helping me think it through. So it has a benefit in and of itself.
Yeah. So that's the purpose of note-taking, which is understanding. So helping to write out and paraphrase from what the lecturer has said, what the key points are. It helps you to understand, because if you can listen to what they've said and think, okay, what is the message? What's the key item that I can take away from this? And then note that down. That will help you to retain that key message. The second element of note-taking is for future use in assignments and exams, and to also help you in the future. So when I start an assignment, I always say about how you can gain an understanding of that assignment. And part of that we always talk about is looking at the keywords in the question, but also there are subject words in the question. Those subject words are relating to topics. The first place that I always recommend looking is back at your notes. Have a look at the notes that are relevant to those subject words, because they will help you understand the topic, so that you can then create research questions that you can use. So that's what I would actually recommend doing, is when you start an assignment or when you are revising for an exam, the first place you go to is what your lecturer has given to you. So your lecture slides, but also the notes that you've taken from them. And then you use them as a platform. So that's how I incorporate notes into things. But I do understand that I've taken so many notes that I've not used, but I have them ready to use in the future. We've had a question, Naomi. I don't know if you want to add it to what I've said, or whether I should answer the question now, which is, how can you keep your notes for years? So would you like to answer that?
I
Or
was
do I?
just thinking this as you were talking, and
Yeah.
so this is the whole electronic versus paper debate. I think is relevant here.
Electronic.
But whether Alex is a big fan of electronic notes, I am much more pro paper notes. If so, Alex, you can talk about electronic notes and their many wonders and benefits in a second. I will just answer the question from the point of view of paper notes. So if it's something that you know you're going to want to, that might be relevant to keep for longer, or you know that you might need to refer back to, consider writing those notes up again. So taking the rough notes that you've written during a lecture and write them up into a more long-term format. So again, that will be that critical thinking. What are the really key points that I want to make, to keep, and to remember? And what can I access elsewhere? What is it important I keep in my notes? So it's definitely worth writing them up again, I would say. And even when you're looking back, I think even better handwriting from a second time round can make a huge difference in how usable those notes are. And then it's about organization, and I can see Alex has got files and folders here, so find an organization scheme that works for you. So it might be that you've got folders like Alex has, and you're organizing things. I used to have ring binders like Alex is holding now, with different divider tabs in on different topics. Because you need to have some way that you can go back and find the information that you've written, and work out which is the relevant note, essentially. So it might be that you've got a contents page, it might be that you've got just, again, so a glossary of key terms linked to different bits of notes. There are lots of different ways that you could do that, but you need to think about what works best for you.
Yeah, I definitely, when I started out my journey as an undergraduate student, I actually did paper notes all the time, and I love paper notes. Because it helps you to get out what you have in your mind on paper, and I actually do prefer that at times for remembering things. However, I also make, so this is my paper notes. Now I make a lot more electronic notes, and the reason for that is partly because of expense, also for the environment and the fact that there's less of an environmental impact by printing. And also printing things costs money, and same with having to have the paper. Currently I don't have much paper anymore. I've used a lot of it since the pandemic started, and I'm not going to get any more. But ultimately, I think the reason why I like online notes is their editability, and also their ability to be accessed easily. So in my bedroom I've had to make my office bedroom. I've had to make I've got a big storage section of my room with all the folders in that I want to keep. So I've got a folder for each subject, but that takes a lot of space up. And also, it takes time to organise and document and make that folder into the correct order. So I had to do that. I had to make sure all my folders were in the right order that I wanted. But in terms of other folder systems, I make an electronic one where I store all my data. And the more I became using electronic stuff, I often then found that it was hard to find paper. So, especially because I was using both, so I had to store the electronic documents I sent and also the ones I had on paper. And sometimes you think which one's which and where different things. So, I like electronic storage. Although the difficulty with that is what if it corrupts and breaks? So I use OneDrive to make sure that it's backed up onto the internet. So a folder system.
And all students of the university have access to OneDrive. So as a student of the University of Derby, you have access to OneDrive where you can store things electronically and access them from any device. So that's really important.
I'd show my staff, my folders that I use as a student currently, but I don't actually have access to them. I've got access to my staff folders. And essentially just having a folder system for your lectures. I have one for each year, each semester, and then the modules that I studied in that semester. Inside that, I then store it by different subjects, like the different lectures, tutorials, assessments, and it makes everything very manageable and easy to find. And I have a section in lectures for notes, and so I'm able to access my notes quite easily. One of the huge benefits, so one of my friends who was really good with notes was, he literally had one document which had all of his notes in, everything, and he was able to get information so quickly. So he'd basically put a heading down. For each lecture when the lecture started, and put his notes down below that. And then, anytime a question came up about a topic, he could just use the Control F key to find it, and he'd get there super quick. And I was like, I'm jealous. I'm sat here like, because I used to be paper back then. I was looking around like, oh, was it in this lecture? This slide?
That is a brilliant idea, because even electronically, Alex. So we've, if you want to hear mine and Alex's full discussion on the benefits and disbenefits of folder systems, electronic folder systems, you can watch our planning and organising live stream. So we won't go into it again. But I don't make lots of different folders. I have everything in just one folder, and I use the search function. But just one document is much even quicker than that, isn't it? And just use the search function to pick out keywords. That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I love it. It's like, I was so jealous. And it's the way that I manage things now, because I often have loads of papers to remember and revise. Control F. I love it. The only issue is at the moment is I have to print everything off, because I'm doing an open book assessment and you have to have everything printed off. So I'm having to print off all my electronic notes.
Yeah.
But I can edit them and make them into a format that works to then print off.
Yes. And if it's got a keyboard shortcut, then Alex is happy as well. Yeah. Have you seen that Teams are bringing a keyboard shortcut for the raise hand feature? That's coming. It's gonna. I just saw it on an article. There's gonna be a keyboard shortcut for the raise hand feature. That's gonna keep Alex very happy, because you like the raise hand feature as well.
I do like to raise my hand.
And a keyboard shortcut, so it's all gonna come together.
Yes, I totally agree with that, especially because I often forget to take it down. So just getting back to the topic a little bit. So we talked about note taking, how you can use and store your notes. I've asked you about a question about OneDrive. What I'll do is I'll send you a link to the ITS guide on OneDrive, because they know how to use it and set it up. You can find it through Udo if you know how to get to that. There's an ITS button. Shall I show people?
Or there's a tile on Udo for Office 365.
Yes.
That's where I'd go.
That's what I meant. Sorry. I'll show you how you can get to that. Actually, I'll do that at the end when we've got some time, and I'll send you a link to it as well in the chat once we do that. But I think for now we should move on to speaking in lectures and tutorials, unless there's anything else worth discussing.
Did we want to touch just quickly on using lecture recordings? I'm aware that Tim highlighted this and said he wanted to make it a significant section. So I don't think we should gloss over it entirely.
We've touched on it slightly. So,
but do you want to talk a bit about Panopto, Alex? Because it's not something that I've used at all, so this is definitely you.
So Panopto is really good because of the fact that you can get a transcript and you can actually get captions on what's been said in the lecture. They're automatic, but that's where a lot of your lecture recordings go. That's where lectures are recorded into, and you can access them for modules. If it's a tutorial or something like that that's done on Blackboard Collaborate, they're in a different place on your Blackboard, and they don't always have the same features. But Panopto on the whole, one of the biggest benefits is you can slow people down or speed people up. So when you're using a lecture to revise or to find a key part in it, you can put the lecture on 2 times speed and just listen, and then you're like, that's the point I want. Or you could put, if they talk quickly anyways, like I talk quick, you could slow me down. And that's really nice. And so some of my lectures I speed them up, some of them I slow them down. And that helps me to make notes when I'm revising for an exam. I don't think I've got more to say about Panopto than that, really. That's all I had to say when I planned out this live stream.
And also, it's a good point that you make. Panopto's used a lot for recording live lectures, isn't it? But at the moment, I expect, and people can correct me if I am wrong, that most recordings will be happening in Collaborate, which doesn't have quite those same feewhich. Is that right, Alex?
I don't know. My course, we use Blackboard Collaborate only because we don't actually have lectures anymore. We only have workshops, which are just tutorials in another name.
But again, on Collaborate, you can go back, you can look, and the benefit of Collaborate it will record things like the chat. So you won't just have the recording of the lecture itself. If you open the chat panel in the same way you would in a live session, so in a live session you can open the chat panel to chat. In a recorded session you can open that chat panel and see what's being said in the chat as well, and that it moves along for you, doesn't it? The chat is real time as per the audio, if that makes sense. So the chat will move along, so you can see what was being said in the chat at the time that you are in the recording. So that's a really great feature of Collaborate.
It also means if someone answers a question, which I guess I've been doing at times, you don't have to have it read back out to you. So that's quite nice, because you can see what questions being asked, where sometimes a lecturer might answer a question and you're like, well, what was the question? Especially in in-person lectures, I was often left guessing what the questions were when I was listening back to them, because they weren't always recorded, because they were done by voice and the mic didn't always pick them up.
Yes, that's something that I try and remember a lot when I'm giving workshops, is to read out or
Yeah.
repeat questions that are being asked. I remember my mum doing. My mum is a minister, so she would run services, and she would have a mic generally just for the hearing loop. But she would always, when someone contributed, she would always repeat back what was said so it can get into the hearing loop. It's a good habit to get into.
It is a good habit, and I apologise if I haven't done that throughout today or any other previous.
I didn't mean that to be critical.
No, I mean that's just a reflection of me. I'm like, actually, that's a good idea. Maybe I should try and do that more. But speaking about asking questions and
Yes,
hearing
that
questions,
leads us in beautifully.
I hate this. Every time I make a good segue, we always end up laughing about it and ruining the segue.
No, but that's because I think they feel. But that one wasn't false. That one wasn't planned. Unless, did you plan that one again?
I had, yeah.
Oh, Alex.
No, I only
I
planned
always
it
think
about
they're
10 minutes
natural.
ago.
They're
It was
always
natural. It was. I planned it when we asked the question. I was like, if I make this point, I can lead it there.
Yes.
So it's not planned.
Yes.
It's just natural in the sense that I think about it a few minutes before. I'd like to talk now about speaking in lectures and tutorials, which actually is a huge thing to do in tutorials, and at times it can be a big thing in lectures, particularly asking questions in lectures as well when you have any questions to ask. And the first thing I would say is do those. Do speak in lectures and tutorials. That's the first piece of advice that I would say. But the real question is not just about doing them, but it's about how to do them and how you can get the courage to speak in lectures and tutorials. So the first question I would like to ask Naomi is, why is it beneficial to students to actually engage and discuss and ask questions?
It's beneficial when you are doing it yourself. So it's beneficial to contribute to a discussion because it allows you to test your ideas. Often, I think people don't, depending on how your mind works, sometimes people don't even fully form what they're saying and what their point is until they are saying it. Being pushed to make a point pushes you to back it up, to justify it, to think through it a bit more. I know I do this on these live streams. I will think things through as I'm talking about it, and I will come out with more. My mouth comes out with more detail than I knew I was going to when I started the point. So that is a definite benefit for doing that. Also, you will benefit from other students contributing, and the best way to encourage other students to contribute is to contribute yourself. Don't overpower and take over a discussion. That won't encourage other students to contribute. But if everyone sits there and says nothing, sometimes it just needs that first person to start the conversation, and that will get the ball rolling. And so by making a contribution, you are prompting others to contribute or to reply to your point or whatever, however that might be, and you will learn from their contributions as well.
I totally agree. If you can get the ball rolling, even if you say a comment and say, I wonder what everyone else thinks about this, or if people share this view, people either say yes or no.
Yes, just asking a question. If you've not got a fully formed point that you want to make yourself, asking a question can be really useful to prompt other people.
Tim spelled segue wrong in the chat. I feel funny about that. He told us what it was. Anyways, yes. So speaking about asking questions, one of the biggest benefits of answering them, or adding to discussions is a way of finding out if you're wrong. And I think I must have the track record in all the lectures and workshops I've been in as being the person who is the most wrong. I get things wrong so often in lectures and tutorials. And initially, I know when I started my first year of my degree, it felt very difficult to answer something in case I was wrong, because I felt like I was being shamed. But actually, it's the whole metaphor of, this relates to questions as well. If you ask a stupid question or you answer a question stupidly, you're a fool for a minute. But if you don't do that, you never know that you are getting that wrong. So with answering a question, it's way better to answer that question now, find out if you're right, become confident that you got it right, or get it wrong and be like, oh well, I know for next time now, and then you can answer that right when it matters in the assignment or the exam, and you'll actually understand that point. So people must think I'm an idiot at times in my classes, because I just answer things using my knowledge, and if I get it wrong, I have learned. I have failed, I learned from that failure. So do try and develop that mindset of trying things. Don't worry about anyone thinking that you're a fool for getting it wrong, because actually you're doing really well. And the same goes to that question that we answered earlier about asking a lecturer to slow down, or asking any stupid question. if you ask that stupid question in front of the audience, people might go, "That's a stupid question. What? You're an idiot. Why are you asking what that means?" Yeah. But you now know, and you're no longer a fool. People won't think that.
And you probably weren't the only person
you weren't
thinking the question as well.
Exactly.
It can be really hard. I'm going to give an example from yesterday, and it can be difficult when you're in a situation where it feels like everybody else knows what they're talking about. So the example I'm going to give, yesterday we were in a team meeting, and Alex and Tim and the lovely Steve who does our graphics were talking about SEO. And I did not know what SEO stood for. SEO was just being talked about. It was being thrown around as a term. We need to think about SEO. This is really good for SEO. And there is that moment of hesitation. And I'm speaking this as someone who is happy and confident in the team. I am more than happy to tell my colleagues what my opinions are, to ask questions. But even so, there's that moment of hesitation. Am I going to look stupid if I say I have no idea what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Like I said, because we know each other very well, that moment of hesitation, I was able to overcome that quite quickly. And it turns out it stands for search engine optimization, which I did know what that was. I just didn't know the acronym. So it was very worth my while clarifying that, because if I'd have assumed it stood for something else completely, I would have had, as you say, Alex, a completely wrong impression of what the conversation was going. So if I'd have said, SEO, does that stand for, I don't know, staging electronic orders, staging electronic orders, and everyone would be like, "No, Naomi, don't be silly, it's search engine optimization." I would have then, at least, as you say, Alex, there might have been a moment where everyone's like, Naomi doesn't know what SEO means. But then I've gone away knowing what it means, rather than having a false impression of what it means.
And Sorry, carry on, Alex. I was going to say, it's about being bold in that moment, because the longer you leave it without knowing the thing, the more difficult it'll be to ask the question. I know there was something in law that I might not have got in one of my first years, and if you're asking that in your third year, you think, the lecture's going to be like, "You're in your third year, how do you not know what that is?" Like, if you don't know how to reference, for example, you don't know what references I'll use, might feel that the longer... That's funny, Tim. The longer it takes you to find out what... or ask that question, the worse it can get. But you need to do that. The best time to ask a question is as soon as you realise you don't understand it. The second best time, if you don't understand something, is now. Whenever it comes up again, do ask. Don't think, people are going to judge me, because the later you leave it, the worse it'll get. Just ask it and try and get that and ask it. And trust me, you need to understand the things that you're being asked of you. So do ask the questions and do be bold and do that.
Can I just we've got one of the points later on, advice for nervous students. Can I just talk about that a little bit? Because this is something, definitely, again, that I feel quite strongly on. So I very much relate to feeling nervous, unsure about contributing, about asking questions. Sometimes it's mood dependent, and it's something that definitely I have grown in confidence over time. I studied well over 10 years ago, and I was often very, very unconfident, not wanting to ask questions, not wanting to contribute. This fear of looking foolish was really strong with me. So I just wanted to talk about that a bit. And I would say certainly doing that preparation we were talking about earlier, the more prepared you feel, the more confident you will be in contributing. And that is that preparation, like I was saying earlier, not just in doing the reading, but starting to think about it. So you've really thought about it. I'm an introvert. I need to think about things before I say them generally. Again, I can use different strengths in these live streams. I often say things without thinking about them first. But that's a skill that I am developing, that I'm actively developing. My instinct is to need to think about things first. So the more I can do that, the better prepared I feel. I would also say, if it's something that really is outside of your comfort zone, to think about it beforehand and to make a decision yourself beforehand how much you want to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Because, so again, to give a personal example, I would not want to contribute to a discussion in a way that I thought was actually going to trigger an anxiety attack. Anxiety attack is something that I suffer from sometimes, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a situation where I am genuinely having an anxiety attack. So the more I can think about something beforehand and say, actually, and it's picking that apart, it's picking apart if I push myself a bit to ask a question, I might need to do that. I might need to give myself that push to ask a question when I don't want to, but I need to. But I know that actually if I push myself too far, that will be too far. So knowing yourself and knowing when is too far can be a really useful thing to think about. And maybe set yourself a little challenge before a tutorial, saying, and in this tutorial, I want to ask at least one question. And see if you can do that and build it up slowly and gradually. Again, I am much more happy contributing in situations when I know the people well than I am in situations where I don't know the people well. So certainly if I was in at the beginning of a module with a group of people I didn't know, I would probably increase my contributions to tutorials as the module went on, as I got more comfortable. And that is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with taking that time to build up your confidence. But all those points Alex has made do all apply. You will get a lot more out of your tutorials if you are contributing. So it's definitely something to try and push yourself on if you're able to.
Yeah.
But we talked about before about should you still go to the lecture if you're not prepared? Absolutely. Should you still go to the tutorial if you don't feel confident in contributing fully? Absolutely.
Yeah. Often you might see a void of people who aren't answering questions, and that you should in that time try and push yourself to ask a question or answer it if no one else is. But if there is someone in your class, and I think people might have found this with me, because there often was voids and I would often try and fill them, don't just accept the fact that in your class there is one person who will answer the questions. Because I know with me, I always try and look for someone else to answer, but people sometimes get comfortable with the fact that, oh, Alex will answer that question. Do still try and push yourself to answer it. Lecturers like diversity of student voices. They like to hear different views, and so if you're offering to answer a question, they'll much rather it than the person who always answers. And as the person who often always answers the questions in lectures, I think it's worth making the point that the thoughts and feelings that Naomi feels about answering things, I feel too. So I get very nervous, especially in a new environment, in contributing. And I know when I started my degree, there was 150 people in my course. Answering a question, it was so difficult for me. I got my first question wrong. I remember doing it, and I felt the shame and the confidence just flow out of me. And it took me like two lectures to build back up to that. And just keep trying, even if you get something wrong. Keep trying and know that you'll learn. And I think even if you are nervous, do try, because of all the benefits you get. And as Naomi says, you can build yourself up to it. You can.
Yeah. Studying at university is about building your skills. We are the skills team. We talk about this an awful lot, and those skills are not necessarily what you would classically think of as academic. Some of those skills might be building your confidence. They might be increasing your contributions and things like this. And just because something is not your natural preference doesn't mean to say that you can't build on that and do that. When Tim first told us that we were going to be doing live streams, I certainly was just like, no, thank you. I do not want to talk live on the internet. Thank you very much. Not for me. No. Next idea, Tim. But Tim didn't drop the idea, and we were all, I think, very nervous the first few ones that we did. We pushed ourselves out of our comfort zone to do this, and now I do genuinely feel quite relaxed sat here talking to Alex and everybody who's listening live on the internet. It's a skill that I have developed. It wouldn't be my natural preference. I have no desire, and again, this is something that comes up in our team meetings. I have no desire to live stream on the internet in my own time. It's not something I would choose to do recreationally. It's not something that I would go out of my way to do. It's a skill that I have actively developed because it's what's required of me for my job, and that goes for study as well. Make the effort to develop these skills.
Yeah, especially because if you do develop it outside of your job beforehand, it can actually help you in getting the job and performing in it when you've got it. One thing that I think might be useful to note is that as part of the Success as a Student podcast series that I'm making, I'm doing an episode about confidence. It's not been recorded yet, it's not been planned yet, but it's one of the ones that's going to come out later in the series, which will be focused and targeted towards that. And I'm going to try and interview a student in that episode who isn't someone who's naturally confident. I think that's not what I would like. I'd like to get someone in that episode who is someone who's ordinary in the sense that they get nervous like the rest of us. Everyone gets nervous. I get nervous. I want someone who gets nervous, someone who's overcome that, and someone who feels better for it and can share that experience, and that's the aim. and hopefully their experience will help you, as well as the a staff member's perspective about confidence and how you can increase it. But I think it's such a vital skill, is becoming more confident, and it helps you with tutorials and lectures. It helps you, as Naomi saying, in team meetings. I've been to loads of team meetings, and sometimes people aren't confident to speak, and you just got to push yourself, and the more you practice doing that now in your lectures and tutorials, the better you'll be in the future in employment, and loads of environments as well. So, Naomi, have you got anything else to add about either confidence, lectures, tutorials?
I
before
don't.
we
I
wrap
can
today
see.
up?
Yeah, we are coming to the end of our time, aren't we? So I think we should start wrapping up.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm just going to go and get a link to IT services. Actually, Tim sent that link earlier about getting advice for OneDrive. Not, I was thinking to say OneNote. For getting advice for OneDrive, so Tim's added that to the chat earlier. It'll also be in the description if I remember. The email is itservices@derby.ac.uk, but you can also find guidance for OneDrive in Udo through the ITS tab.
I'm sure it's an Office
Microsoft
365
Yeah.
tile. If you click on that, there's a whole menu that talks about lots of different things, and I'm sure there's one of those menu options on OneDrive that will talk you through it all.
Thank you for the feedback, everyone, by the way. I'm really glad that you enjoyed the episode. If you have got any feedback or thoughts, do let us know, because it can help us to improve. If there's any other topics in the future that you'd like us to cover as well, then we definitely can do. Let us know, because we're all adaptable. And that's what we aim to do.
Yep.
So, yeah. Have you got anything else to
Lovely.
say?
No, I was just thinking I've got to go and find this third unicorn, so that's my next job. But it's been lovely talking to everybody. Yes, lovely to have your engagement, and do drop us a line if there's anything you want us to talk about in future.
Yep, I appreciate that as well. So today's live stream was brought to you by the University of Derby Library Skills Team, with support from Tim Zelster, who's been helping us in the podcast. Not in the podcast, in the comments. I was reading the comments as that was said. Thank you to Naomi for helping host the live stream with me today. Alexander Wood. Thank you also to Stephen Plant for creating all these lovely graphics that we see on screen. In the description, I will add some further resources when this comes out as a video. However, though I don't think there are any resources there currently. So now you're back on screen, Naomi. And we've had a few ideas for a podcast series, so if you need to go, do go, and I will just answer that question and then end the stream.
I am going to go. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Naomi. And just like that, Naomi has gone, and I have loaded a guest who's never going to come. So, let's have a look at the comment then. So, you're nearing the end of your degree, and the next is your PRP. What's PRP? Sorry. Can you answer that question? I'm sorry that you also didn't get to hear the answer to your question earlier. Which I think you asked about not using your notes. Oh, personal research project. Yeah, we could potentially do something on that in the future. I think, Tim, you would probably be the best to help with something to do with that out of all of us, but it might also be worth you getting someone like the academic librarian team on board for that one. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. If you have got any feedback, do let us know, and I'm going to head off and end the stream soon. So thank you all again.